the last 40 years, the term servant leadership has grown in popularity, and more companies and organizations have tried to incorporate servant leadership in the way they do things. Some examples are obviously Vanguard Investments, Southwest Airlines, TDI Industry, Starbucks, Men's Warehouse, and many congregations and churches have talked a lot about and trained their people in servant leadership. But I think it's interesting and instructive to realize that while we associate servant leadership very often with Jesus and the Gospels, because that's what he talked about all the time in terms of leadership, it actually began with AT&T, Ma Bell, in the days when it was still the big company that ran all the communications devices and media for all people all across the country. And the founder of servant leadership, as we know it today, was Robert Greenleaf. Now, Robert Greenleaf was a young man from Terre Haute, Indiana, who wanted to work for a big company because he was told by a professor when he was a senior at Carleton College that if you really want to make a difference in society, work for a major corporation. So Greenleaf took a job with AT&T, one of the biggest, maybe the biggest corporation of his time. And so what Greenleaf did was a variety of tasks. And then at one point, AT&T said, "Bob, we want you to go out and find why some of our district offices are really productive and happy and good places and alive, and others are dawdling around, not doing good business with unhappy customers." So Bob Greenleaf went out on the road to these district offices and found out what the central issue was. And he came back and says, well, it's all about who's the leader and what's the leader like. So AT&T in its wisdom sent him back out on the road to identify what made the good leaders and what made the bad leaders, or the ineffective ones. And so for a good length of time, Greenleaf was out on the road documenting what characterized the really effective and efficient leaders for AT&T. And he came back and from that data developed the theory and the description of servant leadership. And the reason I think this is important to understand is a lot of people, when they hear servant leader, they automatically think of Jesus and religion and so on. And while that's true, the origins of the theory and the description came from empirical research and direct observation in the workplace for AT&T, which was not, designed to support any particular religious denomination. So Greenleaf tried to get his book published, and the strange thing is a lot of publishers didn't want to look at it. They kind of put it aside as being religious or fluffy or fuzzy, despite the fact that it was based on empirical research. And so what happened was his publisher ended up being a Catholic publisher, Paulus Press, in New York, and his book was an immediate success because people began to say, this is the kind of leader I want to be. He put into words what many people really thought about leadership in their hearts and in their heads, but didn't have the words to express it. And I think this is really important because the Chinese have a saying is, we don't know a thing until we call it by its proper name. Many people knew in their gut what kind of leader they wanted to be, but they just didn't have a language and description to say this is what it is. And once he put it into words, then people began to understand how to implement it and how to become the servant leaders. I'll just read the description because I think it's important to see how different this is from the old models of leadership that we're all kind of used to. So here's his description from his book, The Servant Leadership, A Journey into the Nature of Legitimate Power and Greatness. And here it is. This is what Greenleaf said. The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. And think about that, how important that is. That leadership, servant leadership doesn't begin with ambition or greed or ego fulfillment needs. It begins with the desire to serve. And then at a certain point, conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. Now here's the important description. The servant leader ensures that other people's highest priority needs are being served. That other people's highest priority needs are being served. The best test, if one is a servant leader, but it's difficult to administer, he says, is do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? Now, you see that last phrase is something right out of the Gospels, isn't it? Do those being served, what is the effect on the least privileged in society, and will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? And so while servant leadership has made its way into the workplace, the challenge for any organization or business that says it's going to be a servant leader organization is that last phrase. Sure, it's enough, it's great if the people in their organization become freer, healthier, wiser, and more autonomous. But the company also has to ask itself, will the product that I make or the way I manufacture it, is this going to further deprive the least privileged? And if it does, then it really can't say it's a servant leader organization. So Greenleaf, once he formulated this, people began to latch onto it and say, yes, this is the way we want to be as a company. But it's challenging and it's tough because it requires a tremendous amount of discipline, and it also requires a vision that we can be different and still make money if you're a business, still keep our doors open and make good products, but, and this is the key thing, but serve all of society for the common good. Servant leadership is a great gift to all of us, especially those of us who are, for one way or another, end up being leaders of organizations, pastors, teachers, parents. All of us are leaders. And the best way of leading, it seems to me, is servant leadership. Thank you.